Welcome back, everyone, to North Node Astrology. Today we have a chart reading for Chris. We have a birth time of 11:22 a.m. That's some synchronicity things going on there. Also with the 22nd of June, 1969. And with that date and year and month and stuff, that is a life path 8. That is about completing the cycle. That is about the eternity. That is also about getting out there into the business world and being the product, being out there and getting it forwarded and showing everybody what infinity is. We have, at the time of birth, a Virgo rising, a Cancer sun, and also a Virgo moon there. That's pretty intense. Rising sign of Virgo, somebody starts off with acts of service or something. Somebody might bring them an act of service, or something of purity comes to them, or they go out, they project out into the world with an act of service. Might be a little fearful to get out there and do it, because Pluto in the first house is very direct. Pluto is the ruler of one of the co-rulers of Scorpio, and Pluto is about reconstruction and death and rebirth and fear and power and control. So I would say the darker sides of Scorpio, but with those things, and I've had a couple of clients recently that are that Pluto in Virgo generation. No matter what you put your hand to, no matter what you spend your time on, if you work diligently at it, if you have all the details, and if the thing is pure, sometimes it still dies. That is very nature. That's what Mother Nature does. It's learning that everything is a natural process. Everything is, it incubates, it grows, it lives, it passes away, and then it recorporates back into the flow of everything else. I'm going to actually skip the North Node, and I'm going to come back to it when I get over to Pisces, or skip the South Node and come back to it when I get over to the North Node in Pisces. So also with Jupiter here in the first house, there's a lot of activity going on. This chart owner starts a lot. It's a feminine energy. She starts a lot of things. Like, not that she doesn't finish them, but there's a lot of starting. There's a lot of tasks. There's a lot of beginnings here. Very lucky. Jupiter direct in the first house, but that also requires direct action. Jupiter is going to give you something, but he's going to make you work for it first. It's almost the opposite of Saturn, where the longer you put in with Saturn, the more you get out. Jupiter's going to make you work initially. He's going to go, hey, I'm going to give you this thing, but you got to work for me. All right. He almost might take something away from time to time too. With a conjunct moon here in the first house, there is a very direct emotion about these topics. So it might be kind of up and down. There might be some very direct emotional processing. Now, Virgo, Sun, Moon, or Rising, any of them, the third house, or I would say either the mind or the emotional mind, is Scorpio. So there are the topics of rebirth already, and anything of emotional depth already in the mind of a Virgo. And with the moon here, it makes it much more direct. So there is a direct emotional processing about what's going on. There's also a very powerful intuition involved here with Jupiter and the moon and Pluto, as well as Uranus here. Now, Uranus he's kind of the other side of the coin here. There's radical change that he is willing to make. And especially at the 29th degree, he's very loud. He's very loud. Technology might be a way for the chart owner to serve, or for the technology to serve the chart owner, but it has to be of service. It has to be of purpose. Anything that's fun, I would guess there may have been Now, it doesn't look like to me there's a whole lot of, video game fun or anything of that nature, because there's Uranus in Virgo in the first house, so it's very direct. And if it's not serving a purpose, it's probably not around. And Uranus is also the interface to Aquarius, and that'll come back when we get to the fifth and sixth houses. So the second house starts in Libra and is ruled by Venus, and Venus and Taurus up there in the ninth. So the valuing of relationships and balance and justice, and valuing where the balance point in anything is also a thing. It's not just relationships, but it's also valuing of balance. And a Virgo rising is going to like that balance, the balance of nature, the balance of destruction, the balance of creation, the balance, between how much, food you eat versus how much food you save or store or anything of that nature. Moving into the third house, starting in Scorpio, being ruled by Mars, that's in the third, although in Sagittarius here, and the Pluto that is in Virgo we just talked about. So the mind of the chart owner is always on partnerships, emotional partnerships, emotional depth, even things of finance and emotional connection and anything of that. It's also with Neptune here, there is a little bit of fogginess in the mind about those topics, of fogginess of details. But going back to that stellium there, that grouping of planets in Virgo, there is powerful intuition here being spoken to, in a divine way through those emotional, deep partnerships and those intense partnerships. And it's, it speaks through that. The details are always foggy with Neptune, but the leading of the divinity is always there. The only fallback, the only difficulty I would say is, and a lot of people do this, but I do this myself as well. Neptune is also about addiction, substances, and Scorpio is very addictive in nature. They're very habitual, as well as Virgo, because there's a repetitive process in Virgo, and I believe that's through Scorpio, not necessarily through Virgo itself. But the using of substances to tap in is probably not bad, because everybody wants a shortcut now and then, and it's much easier to tap into source when we do those things. But to use them to, I would say, numb things down or to remove the details is where the downside of that is. And again, all of us have a bit of that downside in us. Mars here also in the third, but in Sagittarius, in opposition to the Mercury in Gemini. So there's a drive in the mind for experience, for travel, for things that are foreign, for the past, for ancestors. And for memory too. All of those things are Sagittarius. Part of fortune, the circle with the X through it. When the chart owner directs her mind into those things, into experience, she gets more out of it than she expected. There's always more to it. There's any thread that she pulls, there's a lot more coming, always. I've got my part of fortune is also in my mind, in my third house, in a fire sign as well. So I definitely know how that works. Fourth house begins in Sagittarius and is ruled by Jupiter. Fourth house is our emotional base. It's also like the home we grew up in and the home that we try to create around us. There may have been a lot of travel in the young life, or there may be travel now, or there may be wants of travel, or possibly just have people in the home who are experienced, who have been there, done that, with a closet full of t-shirts proving that. And Sagittarius is ruled by Jupiter, and that Jupiter is in Virgo, so it's very direct. It's very much about those service-oriented things. Sagittarius also rules trades, so skilled trades with the hands. And so the person may have, their parents may have been tradesmen, or there may have been a trade in the home when they were growing up. And now there's a difference in translation between the parents and the child, obviously. And there was also, structure there. It carries on into Capricorn, which begins our fifth house. It is about entertainment and fun and spark and creation and children, or depending on whether the chart owner has, fur babies, as people refer to them, or not. So that's also there. And this is ruled by Capricorn. So I imagine until the chart owner was in their 28 to 30, that this was a little bit of a difficulty, or there was a wanting to be structured there, especially with a house starting in Capricorn and continuing on into Aquarius. Both are ruled or co-ruled by Saturn. This probably settled down a little bit and got a little more easy to deal with. But business is probably fun to this person, creating structure, creating an evolution of the structure, maybe even physically building, because, we're going back to Virgo here in the fourth house beginning in Sagittarius. So there may be a physical structure building here, but with all of the, I will just say, psychic influences, it's probably structure of, non-physical. Although that Saturn is in Aquarius, so I could be wrong. I definitely need to get to the chart owner and ask them some questions, because I'm curious. Sixth house, beginning in Aquarius. So this is our sixth house, is our daily life, our routines, how we improve ourselves every day. This is our, our food intake and how we serve individuals and how they serve us back. And this is our pets, or if you had horses, this would be your horses also. And it's also co-ruled by Uranus, and that, sixth house here of service, and Uranus being in Virgo, this is very powerful. So there is definitely a technology element here to the chart owner's, daily work, daily service. So their work could come through technology and back out. Possibly, a technical family, given that the 10th house is Gemini, and that the sun is in the 10th house. So may have been a technician before and now is a person of much more spiritual bent, and it just seems like a seamless transition to this one, jumping from one thing to the next. And again, that's also what Aquarius can be. It's also jumping from from one thing to the next. The frequency's on, it's off, it goes from one side to the next, but it's always in parallel. And continuing, into Pisces, there is an element of letting go and of magic and of, loss of the ego, which is the natural opposite of Virgo, which is, projecting the service ego out into the world, projecting the hands out and making things happen, versus letting go and allowing things to come to you, which is how Pisces works. And now we're on to the seventh house, which is house of relationships. And this is all relationships. This is friends, this is relatives, this is romantic partners, this is even enemies, this is business partners, this is any relationship in our life. This is the overall governance of it. And again, chart owner have to move backwards. Like when you teach an infant how to swim, you can't push them. All right, because their bodies aren't strong yet, and they don't know to resist against it. You hold them to you, and you back up away from them in the pool or in the water, and they are sucked into the space that you have created between the two of you. The pressure of the moving backwards is what draws them to you, and this is exactly how relationships work for Chris, for the chart owner. And this is our evolution. Instead of getting in there and trying to make relationships happen, backing up and being of service and letting go and seeing where that one point of boundary is created, that's how they happen. And her relationships probably seem very magical to her. That's because they are. There's also, there can, with Pisces, there can also be a bit of delusion. It's the sign that is ruled by Neptune, which is, ideals and, the spirit realm. So there's a lot of things going on here. So there may be some delusion, but you know what? If you're gonna be in this life, sometimes being delusional and thinking everything is magical is not a bad way to be, other than, or you could watch the news all the time and freak out about everything that comes up, and everything that somebody brings to you is another reason to panic. Let go and realize that there is magic everywhere in everything, right? With Chiron in Aries in the 7th, I would say chart owner is not sure which face to show in those relationships. I have, I'm also Chiron in Aries, but mine is in the home, is in the 4th house. So when I'm at home, I don't know the face to show. Working on it, I would always be working on it, as well as anyone else with Chiron anywhere. But in Aries, this is definitely about direct action. So there's a more difficulty. Now I'm seeing like the first amount of actual pressure happening in this chart. So we have a letting go, but now we also have a direct action, and perhaps the direct action of knowing which face, knowing whether we're playing or fighting, which is also, very Aries, or knowing whether to play the Empress or play the child. It's definitely about roles and which role we play, but stepping back and seeing what unfolds is definitely going to help out more, I believe. 8th house beginning in Aries, and also containing Saturn. 8th house is peak experiences. It is about anything shared that has emotional value, whether that's emotional intimacy, physical intimacy, financial intimacy, and how we rebirth ourselves, how we transform and grow. It's the house that Scorpio rules. In this instance, because it's Aries, this is about Mars, and again, this is about experience. So the experience of those things is what Chris is really after, wanting to make sure that the experience comes back to the home, but that has to be gone and gotten. And sometimes those experiences are difficult. Sometimes they destroy pieces of us. Sometimes they destroy pieces of the situation. Sometimes the situation is destroyed completely, but there's also rebirth there. It's not just destruction. There's never just destruction. There's always rebirth. Energy is never created nor destroyed. It's always transformed. Just like human life, we are always transformed. With Saturn in the house that is governed by Mars, kind of like the general has come to the sergeant's house and he's eating dinner, and the general is holding a big space here in Taurus. So we've got the father of Capricorn, of the earth signs, of the cardinal earth sign here in the fixed earth sign of Taurus. So there's been a more solid grasp of self and of rebirthing physical or beautiful environments, or rebirthing of values and ideas about all of those scorpionic topics that Mars is trying to go out and create. And that has definitely been, I would say, easier or softer, as soft as Saturn can get, because he's the long-term savings account that we can't draw from until we're at 28 to 30. Those have softened up as much as Saturn can get after that 28 to 30 range. But before that, it probably felt like nearly unattainable. Continuing on into the 9th house, which is about expansion. This is about higher learning. This is about religion. This is about spirituality. This is also about travel and, any kind of, physical, emotional, any kind of expansion. And in Taurus, ruled by Venus, and Venus being in Taurus here in the ninth, the current North Node is in Taurus. So there's probably a lot of physical expansion and value expansion going on right now with the chart owner. And with Venus at 15 degrees, I believe the North Node has already passed over that point. So she's already had a touchstone moment with those things earlier this year, probably around, I believe, March. That probably happened. So she feels good about the expansion of herself. And anybody else that's doing those things, anybody creates something that is aesthetically pleasing, that is valuable in your hand, not that somebody told you about, but it's valuable in your hand, that you trust because it's physical, is an expansion point. With all of the gifts in Virgo, and with Gemini with Mercury in Gemini and the 10th house being Gemini, there might actually be, there's an ability called psychometry. And so if you put an item in someone's hand, they can tell you where it came from. And I'm definitely asking the chart owner about that later, because that looks like it could definitely be a thing. There's so much going on in Virgo. And again, Taurus is physical, Venus is physical, and with Gemini, with the Mercury in Gemini, yeah, definitely. Can you hear the Mercury retrograde going on with my words here? In addition, Mercury wants to be talked about here. Gemini wants to be talked about here in the ninth house. So there is also, again, back to the hands, back to the communication, back to the self. Because Taurus is about our values, and Gemini is about our inner self, not just our communication or who we see ourselves with. And that's something that I have fallen into, and I watch other people do this. They think of themselves, it's like me and, right? So it's like yin and yang. Anything where two things are one thing is Gemini. But even doctors will tell you this. Every human being began as a twin, right? So that egg, when it's fertilized, is two. So now there's two, and then those two split. And at some point, there are, two possible viable embryos, and one of them absorbs the other one, right? So, and not always, because obviously we have twins and multiple births, but we all have a twin. We all have that, physical and that spiritual part of ourselves, or that mental and emotional part that goes back and forth, which is, I think, one of the reasons that people have a hard time with Virgos, because they are known for their speech and known for their hands and known for being their authentic self in public. And that's what the 10th house is. And I guess I've transitioned here. But with the Mercury in the 9th house, there's definitely a philosophical bent to the communication here. And in the opposition there to Mars in Sagittarius, that Mars has a drive for, expansion. And with that Mercury in the 9th house, seeking the information, they want to make sure that the information is correct, so that they do get a good journey, so that the journey is sound, so that they can speak about it correctly later on and keep it clear in their mind, right? So 10th house in Gemini, again, back to either Virgo sun, moon, or rising, you see their authentic self. People in public see that. That's one of the reasons why it's like it's one of the reasons why they do try to hide a little bit, because if they're authentic in public, that can be dangerous. That's fearful. That's terrifying, to be your authentic self in public, so people can see who you are, who you really are. When you're by yourself, that can be rough. But it can also be very powerful too. If you see somebody's authentic self, you're like, well, I need to be that too. And especially with that sun in the 10th house and ruling of the 12th, the chart owner is effectively subconsciously programming other human beings to be their authentic self. That's the beauty of a Virgo rising. They are showing you how to be, at least their version of how to be authentic. And it goes back to how they identify themselves. Chart owner looks to me to, being a 1-degree Cancer sun in that 10th house run by, Gemini. They identify themselves as a healer, and they do have a bit of a public presence already, which is how I came to this client. So there's a power here. There's an emotional strength here. You see all the stellium there in Virgo making various angles, 30, 60, not making squares, like it's a 90-degree angle, informing that sun of how it identifies. And if the sun is a solid identification, chart owner knows this is who I am. This is where my emotional center is. Hands, let's go to work. So in addition, in the 10th house also with in Cancer is Lilith. So there's either there's a radical wanting to be nurturing in a specific way, or to not want nurturing in a specific way. And with Lilith, who was mythology, she was Adam's first wife, who was an equal. And Adam didn't want an equal. He wanted, a partner who was subservient. So God created Eve for him, and away we go with our mythology. But that the two radical points in anybody's chart is that Lilith and then Uranus. Uranus is obviously the masculine, it's the digital, the electrocution portion of that. It's going to send lightning bolts, but Lilith is very emotional. And in Cancer here, it almost feels like a natural placement for Lilith to go, I'm a wild woman of my own creation, and I am going to nurture myself in whatever way I want to. And if you would like my nurture, that's cool. And if not, I'm going to roll out, which is very powerful. That's a very awesome healing element there. 11th house, beginning in Cancer, ruled by the moon, and that moon being at 25 degrees Virgo. Again, it's about service. Like, her friends and fans are people who want to be of emotional service to either themselves or the greater collective, and that's what the 11th house is. It's our friends. It's the humanitarian collective. It's an Aquarius friend taught me that the 11th house is our fans. The 10th house is how we're known. Our moon is how our close and intimate people know us, and the 11th house is our fans, our fan base. It's our humanitarian ideals and things of that nature. So being ruled by the moon here, as well as moving into Leo. So there's people who know that they want to create, people who know that they want to get out there and, and party hard and have the biggest life that they want to have. Is the people that Chris wants as friends, and people who want Chris as their friend. That's the people that come in. So the 5th house is what we put out into the world. So she's putting out structure, and she's putting out value, and she's putting out fun and entertainment, and the world is giving her back care and sunlight and fun. It's it's almost kind of flipped here with Cancer and Leo being directed back from Capricorn and Aquarius. All right, and 12th house starts in Leo. So this is our repressed parts of ourselves. This is the word I've been sent here recently is our undoing, how we unravel ourselves, where our ego kind of goes to die, or how we sacrifice ourselves. So there's a sacrificing of the ego directly. There's a sacrificing of the self directly. And that's what Virgo does. It really is what Virgo does. giving up of the time, giving up of the self, giving up of the energy to serve humanity. And that's also what the 12th house is, humanitarian service. And that's also how Chris is subconsciously programming others around her to be that. You know, she gives herself up so they can show themselves, right? She steps back so that they can come forward. You know, it's a give and take in any situation. Thank you very much for giving me this opportunity, Chris. I appreciate it. And thank you for anyone else who listened. I hope you guys learned stuff. It's amusing to me because I was literally just studying Virgo risings and where the sun was and how that worked. And here's another one. So whatever it is you want in your life, if you set an intention, it will come to you. Everything can be a teaching point. I always learn stuff from this. Again, I hope you guys too. You know where to follow me on North Node Astrology on Facebook and YouTube and TikTok. And I will see you later.